And we are back with another episode of the Hockey Princess podcast. I am your host, the Hockey Princess. We have Chris, the old guy, once again. Just as a reminder, folks, make sure to hit that like and subscribe on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, however you watch or listen to us ramble on a weekly basis. How you feeling, Christy? You got your cigar? You ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I'm stuck in the garage. It's raining. Then it looked like it wasn't going to rain. And now it's like downpouring.
Are you hotboxing yourself?
What do you mean hotboxing? What's hotboxing?
Like you're smoking the cigar in an enclosed spot. You're definitely we're hotboxing today, friends.
Is that what hotboxing is?
I think so. I don't know. It's what the kids have told me.
I don't know what hotboxing is, but yes, I've got a window open in the garage.
Oh, so you're not hotboxing. You're fine.
I worry about smelling the car. So if the car smells like a cigar, I'll be in big trouble. So hopefully, nothing like that happens.
Fingers crossed it doesn't. All right, Christy, we got some NHL stuff. We got some more playoff hockey to talk about. Some good things have happened. Some not good things have happened. First and foremost, Crusty old guy and I would like to send our best wishes to the Scheifele family. Mark Scheifele's father passed away. I'm unsure of the exact date, but it was within this past week. So our thoughts and condolences go out to the Scheifele family first and foremost before we get into anything.
Yeah, I guess we can get into that even more. The beauty, which is hockey, which was demonstrated in the handshake line, and the fact that the Dallas Stars owner gave his private jet to Mark Scheifele so he could then go to Medicine Hat and go to the funeral. So
I didn't even know that. I had just heard that Dallas fans were donating $55 to the charity foundation that Scheifele had been working with.
Yeah. Again, we can talk about that a little bit more, I guess, when we go through our stuff. But that's the reason why I love the sport. Fans seem to come together. We hate other teams, but in times like these, you just you put everything else aside. And it must have been very difficult for Mark all throughout that. So, yes, thoughts and prayers.
I think, like you said, there were a couple of pictures that I saw of like Jamie Benn trying to punch out Mark Scheifele, and then 2 days later, they have like a sincere moment during the handshake line. The ability to just kind of just shut everything off, like after games or.
Yeah, they've all known since an early age. I mean, most of them have played against each other for a while. That you try to tear the other guy's head off, and when it's all said and done, you then go back to just being normal human beings and worrying about things. So, it's the beauty of the sport. Other ones, there's just a lot of other shit that goes with it, but we don't need to get into that.
Definitely. Since we're talking about them, the Dallas Stars were victorious against the Winnipeg Jets, which means my bracket is screwed. But that's okay, because Miro Heiskanen's back, and that's really what matters to me. Dallas, I mean, at the end of the day, they played a better game. I think they had a better. I don't even know what the word for it is, because I don't want to say that they went into it a bit more serious, but they definitely had less hiccups than Winnipeg did. I mean, we saw it even in the first round with Winnipeg struggling against St. Louis. I think Dallas just has more pieces to go longer in the postseason.
Yeah, that's about it in a nutshell. Winnipeg's problems continued, and especially their problems away from Winnipeg. where they really struggled. So, a lot of that falls on Collar Hollebuck. The last game definitely didn't. But the better team won. Dallas is pretty deep, and they're getting they got a lot of players back. Again, it's a game that could have won either way. I felt really bad that Scheifele was in the box when they lost. But, it was a bad play on his part with about 20 seconds to go in that game where he's trying to do too much. And it's a terrible deflection that is coming instead of just throwing the puck back deep again. That's why you'll see in these playoffs, especially when it comes to closing out games, these teams just throw it back into the behind the net and let's wait for the next battle. Don't make a mistake. That's why these games get so much tighter. Nobody wants to make a mistake. Unfortunately, Mark made one at that point in time. It could have been a penalty shot too. That would have been warranted. Scheifele was behind him, chasing him down. I figured the refs just were like, listen, we don't want it to end like that. So we'll give him the 2 minutes and see how this all works out. And at the end of the day, that's kind of NHL officiating at times. It's just a really weird and difficult game to officiate, and also brings us back to the referee that I forget who that was, who took a nasty stick to the face.
I saw that.
Anybody who watches this game once, nobody does what these guys do as far as officiating a game, man. Just the skating up and down would be enough, but your linesmen and your referees in there to break up every tussle and everything else. They're underpaid. That I am positive of. At the end of the day, Winnipeg probably didn't have enough talent. Morrissey went out early in game 6. And it's just too big of a void. Your best defenseman, they gave it a good effort. Dallas played a good road game at home, which is what teams do when they're trying to close out. So good on Dallas. As far as your bracket, my bracket's been a mess since forever. So, anybody who would have joined would have won a t-shirt.
There you go. Jumping to our next Western Conference. Guys, it's Edmonton, unfortunately. I don't like it. They're the lone Canadian team now. This means I have to watch Corey Perry more. I mean, not really, because like we said, I'm too poor to watch playoff hockey. But I just have to see Corey Perry's face more, which doesn't make me happy. But on the bright side, I don't have to watch Mark Stone's face. So it's a toss-up with this one. Like we said last week, I was definitely surprised with how underwhelming Vegas was compared to like how I expected them to come out in this series. I think Edmonton dominated. Shocker. Because at the end of the day, you love them, you don't love them. It's still Edmonton. It's still Connor McDavid. It's still Draisaitl. Like, they're competitive for a reason. I'm excited for this Western Conference matchup. Because granted, yes, you have McDavid on one side, but both teams are very, very skilled. And there is one functional goaltender between these two teams. And it's on Dallas.
Most definitely. You got to hand it to Edmonton. As we said, since game 3, they've been steamrolling. They are firing on all cylinders. It doesn't matter who's in net. No. It just doesn't matter. McDavid looks possessed. Draisaitl looks the healthiest he's probably looked at, like in the playoffs in the last couple of years. I don't see how anybody beats them again. Dallas easily could. You got the Otter, and they've got enough talent. They struggled to score a little bit, but they do a real good job of keeping the puck out of the net.
I was going to say their defensive, like even their forwards, everybody's so defensively skilled on Dallas, which makes me think that, even if Edmonton does win, this is not a sweep or a win in 5 for either team. I think this Western Conference easily goes into a longer series.
I would assume so. I definitely will give them the tip of the cap as far as coaching. DeBoer knows how to win. He doesn't know how to win the big one, but he knows how to win a lot of playoff series. So I would assume they go to lockdown mode. Their objective is to win everything 2-1, 1-0. They will clog up that neutral zone like crazy, and they will do their best to take away McDavid as well as you can, which basically is shutting him down in the neutral zone, sending two people to him.
Who do you, out of Dallas's roster, what line do you throw to match up against McDavid?
That's an interesting question. Sagan's healthy.
Yeah.
Sagan's pretty fast. Rope Hintz is another centerman. Pretty fast. Matt Duchene isn't too shabby either, and he's very good defensively. So that's where Dallas has probably more. I would assume they go with Sagan and Ben against McDavid at home for at least some of it. But the thing is Edmonton has dominated at home because they can get the matchups. But they have 3 lines. You can't say that match up against McDavid because no line does, but they have 3 lines that they are very comfortable putting up against McDavid. So there isn't that much of a oh shit factor when they're on the road. That's where it's really going to come into play. Rope Hintz is a pretty darn good defensive player too. And Duchene's a grizzled veteran. And again, we've seen that Sagan still has somewhat of his wheels. So, I would assume they'll try to pound them a little bit. I guarantee they go after Draisaitl and try to pound him. So the wild card in this is, Jason Robertson now should have his hands, feet, and legs all back together.
Let's go.
Which will be big for them. Again, Edmonton has played very physical this series. Dallas will not shy away from that. Dallas has a couple thumpers on the back end too. They won't see a ton of ice time.
But they'll see enough to make an impact.
They've got a couple big boys though, and they have the Moose. So for as much as you're worried about McDavid, the Moose has had one hell of a playoff. So I don't know who you're going to have Nugent Hopkins attempt to shut him down. That's where this game becomes a little twofold just because of that. Again, Edmonton has Henrique. They've got other veterans that can play a solid defensive game. So it should be a good one. I wouldn't bet against the Otter at the end of the day, but I think Edmonton's on a mission now. So on the grounds that I'm always wrong, I will pick Edmonton.
Good. Jumping over to the East, got the Carolina Hurricanes playing boring hockey, dethroning the Washington Capitals. I'm very excited for this. Mainly just because I like the Carolina Hurricanes. This will be exciting. I think this will be not like the first challenge that Carolina is going to face, because I do want to give New Jersey and Washington the benefit of the doubt. However, Washington did not come out ready to play in this postseason matchup, where I think Florida definitely will. So very exciting. Yeah. Christy, what's your thoughts on Carolina moving? We kind of expected this last week.
Yeah, we had basically already written that Carolina would be in, and we were not mistaken, which is surprising.
Yeah, it happens just a couple of times.
They're an extension of their coach,
who's nuts. Guys, this Eastern Conference Finals is essentially you have the most drama queen, like most dramatic men in this sport. Some of the few, not the most, but a couple of the few most dramatic men against each other as head coaches. And I cannot wait. You thought Paul Maurice versus John Cooper was funny during post-game media? No. Paul Maurice versus Rod, that's going to be entertaining.
Yeah, and I expect the Canes to give up more of a fight than they did last year. They are what they are, and they struggle to find goals from other places. You've got Svechnikov, you've got Aho, and then after
Jarvis.
Huh?
You got Seth Jarvis.
You do, but sometimes he goes away. Where Florida has a lot of scoring. Yes, what?
Which also, can we just talk about Stankoven going to the Western Conference Finals in his first year, and now he's going to the Eastern Conference Finals in his second year? Very excited for him.
Yeah. And we might as well talk a little bit about Washington's coach. I've never heard
Spencer Carberry. I love him. He's fantastic.
I've never seen anybody fawn over a player on the opposing team as much as he did, which was all very due for Mr. Slavin, who plays unbelievable defense. And the thing about him is you don't even notice it. It's so routine. He's going to have to be on his game. He's also going to have to deal with physical things, because if I'm Florida, that's the guy I'm taking away. He's the one guy that I want to attack when I'm dumping the puck in. I want to hit him. Because guarantee if I can get to him, the rest will take care of itself. So I expect them to go hard after him. But yeah, we knew Carolina would be in, so I guess we can segue over to Florida and the end of that kind of unbelievable drama, which, we should be able to do about a half hour on.
Guys, he's going back.
Yep.
Tuomo Ruutu returns to the Eastern Conference Final. And most importantly, although shout out to the few non-Meathead nations that I saw on Twitter during Sunday night's game that were actually giving Seth Jones the credit that he is long overdue for, with 1 goal +2 and 23 minutes and 42 seconds in that Game 7 on Sunday. The Florida Panthers eliminate the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they're running it back. Yes, I'm so happy to see Seth Jones smiling. I'm so happy that, now that Toronto's out, I don't have to listen to Paul Bissonnette talk as much. I still have to listen to him talk a little bit, but less now that Austin Matthews is out. And you get more Tuomo Ruutu on screen. This is great.
You do, and Tuomo was on the screen a decent amount in Game 7. As I said, there's a lot to break down over this series because Toronto is the mecca of hockey, and this drama has been going on for 8 years. And everybody brings up the Hockey News cover of all 3 of the kids saying, "Let the parades begin." And after year 8, they're still nothing. I'll start on the Florida side first. Your listeners know full well what I think of Seth Jones.
We love him.
I'm a big fan. Yeah, it was nice to see a couple people come out and say, "Oh, well, yeah, he's playing good," and there was other podcasts that they tried to hold out as much as possible to still back him, but Meathead Nation, is an overwhelming thing, and when all these meatheads get it in their head that they're right, and they just like to yell, 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 but I'll curve myself and come back around to just hockey. What did it for me about what everything that Seth chose was in Chicago was in the third period of that game. Seth had already scored. He had already had his assist, and he was playing dynamite. And when they were attempting to pour it on, it was either a 3-1 game or a 4-1 game. Seth was pressing it in the offensive zone. Not the goal that was disallowed. That right. One was just another great play.
Moment with Gadjevich?
No, he lost an edge or got tripped, but he went down deep in their offensive end. And I went, oh shit, it's going to be a 3-on-way the other way. But because of the way Florida plays and because of the way they bust ass, by the time Toronto got all the way into their offensive zone, it was a 3-on-3. And that explains everything you need to know about why at times Seth Jones looked awful. Because when he was with the Blackhawks, he goes down in the offensive zone. That is a 3-on-1 back the other way. Because there's nobody busting ass back to make sure it's not. So he looks pathetic. There was nobody ever to pick him up from a defensive end, and I got a million people I can blame on that, but yada, yada, yada. So that stood out for me, how these guys busted ass back. And Seth was dominating. He can dominate because he doesn't have to do everything, and then if he realizes, well, I can still do this. It's a huge win for the Florida Panthers. That trade was a huge win. Is everybody who wants to say we took them for everything they're worth?
We didn't.
They got rid of a contract they wanted to get rid of in Spencer Knight. Okay? They wanted that contract gone. That was almost $5 million for a backup goaltender. Okay? And they give up a first-round pick, which will be like a high 20s. Doesn't mean anything to them. For somebody who plays 25 minutes.
Number 25 for the pick.
Well, that's the Toronto pick, but Florida gave up for Seth.
Oh, yes, Florida.
So, and you're getting a top 3 defenseman that plays 25 minutes a game. He is on your number 1 power play, and he is on your number 2 penalty kill. That's a win for Florida, okay? For everybody who thinks that you hose Zito, Zito hasn't been hosed very much. That's
I was going to say, I'm like, I don't think Zito can get hosed.
And as far as Toronto, oh my goodness, it's all coming out of the woodwork.
I do, and not to add on to the pity party that they've been receiving for the past couple of days.
It's been huge.
But as a fan of a team that does get frustrated quite a bit, granted, I've been very fortunate and privileged in my life to see a lot of winning, also seen a lot of losing. Never in my life, even Game 7 of 2014 against the Los Angeles Kings, could I imagine burning my jersey, throwing it onto the ice, or leaving after the first period. Toronto does not deserve them. And I think the core four should just leave out of spite of the fans. They won't, because they have, Stockholm Syndrome or whatever they have about being the kid from Ontario playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think they should all just leave just to spite the fans, because they don't deserve them.
Yeah, the blowback to the Leaf fan base has been pretty fun to watch from Florida players and other players and this and that. The throwing of the jerseys, that doesn't bother me a bit. These are people that probably spent $3,000 to go to a game, who they won't go to 2 games a year, who can easily afford to throw away a jersey. I don't consider that your diehard fan base to begin with.
No, but I do see it as a big sign of disrespect to the players on the ice.
Yes. I always find it a little bit more because you'll always on your whatever that X, Y, and Z thing is, people burning jerseys. I have yet to see in my sporting world players that actually deserved anything like that I thought were so pathetic.
Right.
Um,
Because at the end of the day, there's still NHL hockey players. You have to have some sort of level of talent to be here. Nobody sucks that bad that they shouldn't be here at all.
correct. So number one, I think you're going to get what you wanted, because you sealed Mitch Marner's fate.
Mitch Marner
isn't coming back.
Mitch Marner's a duck. I've been saying it. I'm calling it. I'm saying it now on the show. So when it does happen in July, I can do the I'm right dance. I've been saying it, especially now with the Quinville edition. Marner's a duck. Quack, quack.
Marner's going to be able to pick where he wants to go. And
in
he'll
Southern
have a choice
California
between
with an actual head coach where you're 3 centermen deep. Gosh, I think that sounds like a good idea.
Exactly. If you want to go all the way over there, I don't know. I mean, Mitch seems like a righteous dude who could get used to, coastal California pretty easily. That's one spot. I'm hoping for Chicago. I've heard a lot of people say he doesn't perform in the playoffs, so I don't want him. We're not in the playoffs. We're not close to the playoffs. We can cross that bridge when we come to it, but guaranteed if the Hawks were to sign him, he automatically becomes your most talented player for the next 4 years. That's a fact. He plays on your number one power play. He's your number one penalty killer. The kid does it all, except he hasn't been able to put a team on his back and bring them to the promised land.
Which, not everybody can do that.
Correct.
I mean, you look at Carolina right now that kind of juggles between a couple of guys that will do that at times. If Mitch Marner does come to the Blackhawks, I'm not going to be upset by any means. I just don't realistically think it's going to happen based on the fact that,
we suck.
The
We
pool
suck.
of candidates for the head coach is quite limited, is giving me, kind of the inkling and idea that maybe...
You mean he won't want to come play for Jeff Pascal?
Maybe he doesn't want to come here. Maybe we're not as in great of a position as Blackhawk management, Blackhawk media tends to think that we are. Maybe Mitch Marner saw the handling of 19 and 88 and said, yeah, you know what? I'll pass. I'm not going from one fire to another fire. Like I said, if he does come, that'd be great. But I also do think him coming is the potential to just set him up to be the next Seth Jones. Because like you said, he can do all of these things, but we don't have anything else. So he automatically becomes the next fall guy, because obviously you can't blame it on any KD pick or any of the younger kids, because, they're still growing and we don't have accountability in the locker room. So I hope for his sake, wherever team that he goes to, he is not the next fall guy, because he's already had years of that in Toronto.
Correct. But I'll pick him up at the airport. I have no problem. It does not happen very often that you're able to get a player like Mitch Marner and not give up anything. And that's what that is right now. So whether it's Anaheim, I'm hearing Detroit, which would be a huge mistake because they're not all that guy. Anaheim, I consider closer than Detroit is to starting to make noise, but he can pick wherever he wants to go. And that's for between 12 and 13 million. He could also go to Utah for probably 16 mil a year.
That's another one that I saw of him going to Utah.
Then you're definitely, people aren't going nuts over their hockey there. Trust me, their fan base is growing, everything else, but they're all worried about going to national parks and doing some skiing. Okay. Hockey isn't the biggest thing there. It'll be very interesting for what he decides. I'd be fascinated to know how that process goes. I cannot see a world in where he comes back to Toronto. I just don't see the reasoning.
No,
I am sure
going or coming back to Toronto over Marner.
I'm sure he feels bad. And I'm sure part of him would have liked to brought this championship to Toronto, and he'll deal a tiny bit with abandoning Matthews and Nylander, but that'll go away quickly. And getting booed off the ice, I'm pretty sure it went away just then. Does he have problems in the playoffs? I don't know. He didn't show up a lot in this one.
But
he's had playoffs where he's tried to carry them on his back, and it hasn't worked either. I'm not saying you can pull up the stats. He's not a playoff flop. No. He's not somebody who goes away all the time.
I think also, a player, it's hard to judge a player's performance value in the playoffs when they play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because even if you do play excellent, it's still a loss because probably you're the only one playing excellent. We saw Willie Nylander last year give like 110% while he could barely see or whatever, and it still wasn't enough. I think there's a bigger flaws in Toronto that I don't think should be a complete direct tie to Marner's playoff performance and like how we critique.
Yeah, and again, players check out for a series or two. They're worried about by the opposing team, and sometimes things don't go according to plan. Doesn't mean that he is nowhere a playoff bust. He's going to be a huge addition for whoever takes him.
Quack, quack.
Should be the Chicago Blackhawks.
Quack, quack.
Chicago Blackhawks. Tavares, I think he'll get more money going someplace else. As far as Toronto, now you're worried about dismantling a little bit and trying to figure out what to do.
Well, I think Toronto needs to go through a full Kyle Davidson rebuild. Because clearly you've got some issues at your core. You've changed your coach. You've changed your GM. You've changed other pieces. It's time to send all the core four away.
Well, basically, you're not sending them away. You can't send away Nylander, and you can't send away Matthews. They're all no movement clauses, so you can't burn it down. You have to get better play from your defensive end. I mean, you're relying on Jake McCabe an awful lot, and O'Reilly, who is not as advertised, also. And Tanem's a great number 4 defenseman when everybody's playing a certain way. But to have all of the players kind of the same and at the end of the day, just not very mobile is a killer. Yep. So that's what they're going to need to address. I believe this is now the new GM's team and your new coach.
Yeah.
Shanahan won't have much to do with this. The other two guys will stay, and they'll have to figure out a way to piece it together. Do they have players to carry a team? I'm a firm believer that Austin Matthews can carry a team. He also is good on the penalty kill. He's great on the power play. He's great at the face-off dot and can score. I mean, that's a great player. Nylander's a great player. Why it doesn't mesh, I am unsure. I know why it didn't mesh in Game 7. Everybody's got their little like pound this, and their team says this. Ours used to be one goal, and now we've taken it literally to just score one goal a game is our one goal. But the Florida Panthers
sure
won.
We scored multiple in Ottawa and Montreal.
Florida's is fitting to that team. Time to hunt. As I was watching that first period, I was just thinking, oh my God, look at them. The whole team is hunting. I mean, it's them to a T. And it was unbelievable. It was like it was an AHL team out there against an NHL team. And for a Game 7, it just blew my mind. But Florida was dialed in, and everybody knew exactly where to be. And it was constant pressure everywhere and constant coming. It was beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Number one, because of Seth Jones. So now you've got this team that loves to hunt against the team that never stops. The Florida players have already come out and said it. Well, it's never fun playing Carolina. I don't know how this series goes.
I have no idea, but it's going to be gosh darn entertaining, and I cannot believe that they have to play tonight.
Tonight?
Yeah, Game 1, 7 o'clock.
Are you shitting me?
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
I don't know, but we're going to venture over real quick because we've talked a lot about other teams, and now we got to talk about, yes, Krusty?
Krusty did not know this. I thought they started Wednesday.
Dallas and Edmonton start Wednesday.
Holy shit. I got to go to Costco. Oh, damn it.
All right. Well, we're going to jump
All right,
over.
Sorry about that. All right,
we're going to jump over to another league really quickly because we haven't talked about the news going on in the PWHL league, and that is that they have 2 new expansion teams coming, friends. One in Seattle and one in Vancouver. Very exciting. They do have an expansion draft. That is June 9th. But we're just going to break down kind of how this expansion is going to go. So each of the 6 inaugural teams will relinquish 4 players from their roster from this past year. So expansion teams will have acquired 12 players just right off the bat from the conclusion of the expansion draft. From the 6 inaugural teams, they can protect 3 players from selection in the exclusive signing window and the expansion draft. After inaugural teams have relinquished 2 players, they can protect 1 additional more, increasing their protected list to 4 players. Players eligible to be protected must be under contract with that team for the 2025-2026 season, so this upcoming season, and then have their playing rights held by a team for the 2025-2026 upcoming season, or 4. So one or the other, they either have to be on the active roster or have their rights with one of the original 6 teams in order to be protected. Let's see. And then so the player protection list is due June 3rd of whichever teams or whoever they choose to protect. And then June 4th is the exclusive signing window. which is when Vancouver and Seattle will be granted a 5-day exclusive window to sign a maximum of 5 players. That's anybody that's unprotected by the team or with an expiring contract that hasn't been renewed by the team that they were at for the previous season. There is no required minimum number of players who must be signed during this window, so they can sign as many or as few. And then the expansion draft happens, like I said, June 9th. Vancouver and Seattle will select a minimum of 7 players until each team has comprised of a 12-player roster. Like I said, they can play more. They can draft. They can take more. They can take less. It kind of depends on, if how many they've signed in the signing window a couple of days prior. And then players eligible to be selected for the expansion draft could be unprotected players under contract for 2025-26 season, and then players whose draft rights are held by that team for the upcoming season. And then we have the PWHL draft, the big one. Same week as the NHL draft. Imagine that. On June 24th in Ottawa, and it will consist of 6 rounds, allows all eligible 8 PWHL teams to select eligible players. So how it works is they'll have the expansion draft in a couple of weeks, kind of to get 12, and then in the major draft a couple of weeks from then, they will draft with the rest of the other 6 teams, similar to the NHL draft.
Okay.
So just wanted
my
to share.
question is, my gal coming out and going to be the first pick in the PHWL draft?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? I need answers.
We will have that answer for you next week.
Okay. And for those people who don't know who my gal is, that would be Abby Murphy. Who I believe would be the first pick.
Yeah, we will have that for you next week.
See how I give Hockey Princess work? That's right. It's all about giving the work.
So much work. Little sprinkle of Rockford news. Akurati has signed a 2-way contract back in Finland, I believe. So he will not be playing with the Rockford Ice Hogs come October. It's okay, because it's just one more spot one of my favorite kiddos can get for this upcoming season. But it kind of makes sense, if you're a European player playing in the AHL, it's completely understandable if you kind of see like that's where your future would be if you stay in the US, to go home instead of playing kind of in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest.
I agree. You're much sure you'll get more money at home, and it's a lot more familiar territory. That's for sure.
Well, and I don't know the personal details of his life, but I would imagine like if you have tiny tots or family, like if you have the opportunity to be home, it sounds like a pretty good thing.
Yeah. And again, if you're, and the writing's kind of on the wall that you're probably not going to make the NHL, going home seems to be the way to do it. So good for him. We got any other Rockford news?
Nope.
Okay.
We are gonna jump really quick because I want to do the lore before and see whatever time left for Krusty to speculate about his angers with Blackhawk management. But first, we have Blackhawk lore.
Okay.
Guys, I did the notes this time. Most of them. I'm still going to Krusty do a little bit just because, I'm a baby and he was around when some of these guys played.
Yes, but there's 2 sides to Krusty, and some of it, very foggy on the Krusty memory. You need to remember that. Krusty at times needs to go back and read and remember what he saw.
Fair enough. So guys, for this week of Blackhawk lore, we have brought it back to the basics. So imagine you're sitting at your seat in the United Center, you look up, and past all of the Michael Jordan banners that are back now, you've got some numbers with the Blackhawk logo, some guys who have their numbers up in the rafters. And so we're going to break down, who are these guys? We talked about Marian Hossa at great length last week, so we're really not going to cover him this week. His number is up there. But like I said, we talked about him a lot last week with last week's Blackhawk lore, so we're just going to focus on the other guys who have their numbers up in the rafters. First off, with number 1, you've got Glenn Hall, who played for Detroit, Chicago, and St. Louis, Calder winner. Fun fact, was a Stanley Cup champion before ever playing his first NHL game, because he was called up to be the backup for Detroit, and then when Detroit won, he got his name on the cup, but he had never played a game before. Was traded with Ted Lindsay to Chicago, played from 1951 to 1971, was elected to the NHL Hall of Fame in 1975, so just a couple of years after he stopped playing in the NHL, which I thought was cool because most of the time it does take a period of time for them to get elected, or at least maybe that's just how it is nowadays. Still holds the records for most consecutive starts with 502 games in front of the net, which is insane. Absolutely insane. I know many people said that nobody would break Gretzky's record, but I really don't think any goaltender is going to break Glenn Hall's record, because that's just ridiculous.
Yes, that one's a guarantee. Correct.
Like, that's insane.
Nobody's coming close to that.
And he is a 3-time Cup winner, 2 times as a player, and then 1 time as a goaltending coach, and then a Vezina winner as well.
Yeah, I know. I never saw him play, so there's not much for me to add. Just let it sink in. 500 and change games started in a row. And that doesn't happen. Goaltenders now don't even start more than 20 games in a row.
No.
So, that's a crazy time where you didn't have much padding, and it was a scary time. So, yes, well deserving to have his number 1 hanging.
Absolutely. Next, we've got, actually, I want to do these in number order. So give me 1 second. We have 2 number 3s, friends. First, number 3, we have Keith Magnuson, who played 589 games, all with the Chicago Blackhawks, was a defenseman, did not have, the most points compared to other ones that have their numbers up in the rafters, but did log 1,442 penalty minutes. Based on from what I've heard from other people, because granted this was before my time, he seemed like the old school definition of bring your team into the fight.
Yes, he's the poster child, or at least if not the poster child, one of them. He would fight anybody at any time. He would stick up for anybody at any time. Keith did not have the stellar career as others that are probably hanging from any rafter, but his play on the ice was the ultimate teammate, and his personality and what he did off the ice in the Blackhawk community was, from what I heard, second to none. I heard just an unbelievable guy. And the charity work and other things that he did was off the charts. And that's the other reason why that number got retired. He was just a phenomenal human being, a nasty-ass man on the ice. So very deserving, and definitely a huge part of Blackhawk lore, and especially that Blackhawk lore where you love that, that lunchbox guy going to work every day. He was that guy. So
next, number 3, which is one of my favorite former Chicago Blackhawks, because the few times that I got to meet him, he was absolutely just the loveliest human. And that is Mr. Pierre Pilat, who's also a defenseman, played with Chicago and Toronto. Most of his career was played with the Chicago Blackhawks, only played his final season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 3-time Norris winner, played from 1955 to 69, and then went to the Hall of Fame in 1975, same year as Glenn Hall, and then is still the 8th all-time for the Chicago Blackhawks for assists. And just a lovely human. Like, I can't say enough how nice he was when I got to meet him as a kid.
Yes, that was a takeaway when I met him. I still remember riding the elevator with his wife, and as the elevator opens, he sees that it's his wife, and he immediately rises to meet her. And this has got to be after 40 years of marriage. I sat there and went, yeah, I'm not that good of a person. This is something I could attempt to emulate. It just seems so genuine. And yes, our conversations that we had with him were also genuine. He always deferred, wouldn't talk a ton about himself. He was one of those first offensive defensemen, a beautiful skater. And he was part of that group. You had Bobby Orr, who was all world, but Pierre Pilat could bring the puck up from anywhere. So definitely he got on through he was just that good. He was an unbelievable player and started to redefine the position. So, and yes, just in all, the times that we got to meet him was, yeah, that's a class act, man.
Yeah, definitely. Krusty, you're jumping to the next one because you've watched this guy a lot more than me.
Oh, yeah, good old Chris, who, I still have to see in everything. Duncan Keith comes into town, and I still see Chris Chelios. For this,
sorry, do we know why Dunk was in town? Like, Duncan Keith is throwing out the first pitch at Wrigley. What year is this, 2011?
They were just starting the pomp and circumstance they called it inaugural day. So that was the day that the Blackhawks were told that they could get a franchise back in 26. So this is starting the pomp and circumstance, which will be the 100-year celebration, which will be next year. That's why he was in town. He was on with the CHGO boys. They really tried to lead him down a path interview-wise that he did not go down. Very guiding questions for him to answer to fluff up the new regime, and he didn't bite. It was beautiful. Let's get back to Chris. I've got my own opinions on Chris, and I will leave those out of this little part of it. Chris Chelios was probably the second best American player ever.
Gee, I wonder who the first is.
Yeah, the first is Patty Kane. But Chelios did it all. He was rough. He was tough. He was an ass on the ice. He was an ass off the ice, too. What I come back to from him was either the 95 or 96 team that went to, I believe they went to the conference finals. And basically, as a defenseman, he put that whole team on his back, led them in points, led them in scoring as a defenseman. It was unbelievable, but he did it all. He was a local.
It's all about him.
Well, as I said, I'm not going to go into the rest of it. That is what it is. But still, he made a huge mark on that organization. He was a local kid, and he played lights out. He was a phenomenal player. He was a phenomenal leader for that time. So, he's a captain of your team. He spent a little time in Montreal before coming here. Is he deserving? Sure, he is. I'll take away the old should they have waited and given it to Seabrook first, whatever. He still was deserving to have his number retired. He was that good, that's for sure. When I first got my tickets in 91, he was a mainstay of that little core, your Larmer, your Ronick, and Chelios and Belfour. He was an unbelievable player who, for the rest of his career played till for whenever. And I don't have a problem with that either. I always thought if I ever could have had the ability to play pro sports, it would have been like Chelios, where they would have had to rip it off of me, because why ever give up playing this game? And Chris was that way. Why ever? This is my one field. I'm good at it. I'm comfortable. So, I'll put aside my other little angst. Very deserving. Just a cornerstone of that team in the 90s. It wasn't his fault that it all started to be disbanded. A lot of that lays on Dollar Bill and everything else. And we won't get into the other stuff that happened right at the end. But he gave it all for the team. Those guys busted ass to attempt to bring a cup in, and it just never quite worked out. What are you going to do? For a while, it was just you had the Oilers, and you couldn't never get past them. But Chris there was not a weakness in his game. If you needed a clutch goal, he would deliver. If you needed somebody to step up and start pounding on people, he delivered. So good for him. Well-deserved, I will say.
Next one, probably the most famous, or at least most well-known out of the guys that are up in the rafters. And that is your Golden Jet Bobby Hull. Played with, which this learning more about Bobby, because obviously I knew a bit from, being a Blackhawk fan and meeting him quite a few times, but learning, getting the stats and looking everything up led me down a deep rabbit hole of the difference between the NHL and the WHA, which I wasn't aware that was a thing that existed. So he played for both the NHL and the WHA. NHL first with the Chicago Blackhawks, and then the WHA was kind of just like a way to get around the NHL to pay them more, and it was smaller markets than in the NHL. It's where your Edmonton Oilers came from, your Quebec Nordiques, your Hartford Whalers, other cities like that. So he played both. Was the first in the NHL to score 50 plus goals in a season, was a goal scoring machine, was a speed machine, had played 1,063 NHL games, 610 goals, 560 assists, and then 640 penalty minutes. He was all that in a bag of chips, plain and simple.
Yeah, I couldn't say anything more. Again, he had problems with Dollar Bill and wanted to go for the money. It seems
like who didn't?
Nobody did, because he didn't want to pay people. At the end of the day, he didn't want to pay people.
I will say, as another thing about Bobby Hull, as someone who was privileged to go to the Blackhawk convention back when it was still a thing, probably will never be a thing again, but it was still a thing while I was growing up. One of the best parts of the Blackhawk convention was Sunday mornings. It was always Bobby, Stan, Tony, maybe Savard a couple of times, but it was usually those three. And Bobby Hull was the most excellent storyteller, and the amount of stories that you would get from him about the old stadium and his loathing for Dollar Bill was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, no, Bobby would talk your ear off. That's for sure. He always had great stories. He always wanted to give back. There's plenty of baggage about Bobby, and again, nothing that we'll bring up here. But what he meant to the team, he was that first flash superstar. he was a superstar. He played with Stan, and Stan was a phenomenal player, but Bobby had that charisma. He had that thing, that spotlight thing. And, his speed was incredible and that shot was unbelievable. So, but he had always been more than willing to give back to any fan that wanted to talk to him. And he would sit there and talk to you for a while. So, which especially for younger fans, it's huge. To be able to sit down and talk to an icon and you actually have a conversation with him for 10 minutes, you don't forget stuff like that. He might forget it, but us as fans, it's one thing that you'll always remember. So, love the Bobby, out of that whole group, you didn't think Bobby would be the last to go, but he was. So.
Next one on the list, we've got Dennis Savard, the original Savvy, played from 1980 to 97, played for Chicago, Montreal, and Tampa. One of my favorite things about the Bell Center is if you go all the way to the top, they've got pictures and names of their most prolific players that have played for the Montreal Canadiens, and Dennis Savard is up there, known for the spinorama, but if anyone says anything, my favorite's always to watch Patrick Kane do that, but did win the Stanley Cup with Montreal, was actually traded to the Montreal Canadiens for Chris Chelios in 1990, was the head coach for Chicago for, is it 1 year, 2 years?
1.5.
1.5, something like that. Played with Chicago for 2 different stints from 80 to 90 and then 94 to 97, and then logged slightly under 1,200 games and about 1,300 points, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2000.
Yeah, he was probably that first guy that offensively would bring me out of my seat. He was a magician. Between the spinorama and just other things, he would make people look silly. And again, Dennis, very good man. I remember telling you and your sister of, when you get fired, this is the way you act. And when he got fired, never came out a bad word. He didn't fire off bad shots.
Which he easily could have.
But you just don't do that kind of thing. And was something that I even gave me more respect for Dennis. But in the game, he was phenomenal. He was another guy that made that building just friggin' rock, man. He could do things to you that you just went, oh shit. We were very fortunate to get another kid who did the same thing. And that doesn't happen a lot, especially in a lifetime. You don't usually get 2 players like that. But Dennis was phenomenal.
Absolutely. Next one, we've got, again, one of my favorites, one of the best dressed, in my opinion. Was a big fan of the plaid golf pants that Stan Mikita wore. Krusty talked about him a little bit. Played alongside Bobby from 58 to 80. Was originally from Slovakia, but then moved to Ontario when he was a kid. Like I said, Stanley Cup champion with Bobby for the 1961 year, which was only his second season in the NHL. And in his earlier games, he was definitely known for playing a dirtier game, and then very much changed it throughout his playing style or his time of playing. Was inducted to the Hall of Fame in 83. And retired early just due to chronic back issues, which is a common thing you see with most players. And I definitely do remember going to one of these events, or at least I think it was one of these events, but turned to golf after his NHL playing career, which most hockey players do, most Canadians do. But he had big golf events for the charity that he was with. And Christy, did we go to one of those? Because I definitely remember being dragged to a golf event and I'm at the rope and all of
yes, that was one of
there, and I'm just why do I have to be so quiet?
Yes, that was I believe that was a Stan event. Stan was another phenomenal player who
We love Stan.
Then at some point in time figured out he couldn't play as physical if he was going to stay together. He was definitely the yin to Bobby's yang for a little while, where Bobby was meant for the spotlight. Stan was more than fine being away from the spotlight. And yes, the plaid clothes are always, a huge hit. Stan was another just a phenomenal player and a stronghold on those earlier teams. Those 60s, those 70s that were just you came to watch him play. He was phenomenal. So,
and then last but certainly not least, we've got another. I mean, really, they're all my favorites, but big fan of the Esposito family. We've got Esposito, number 35, played for Montreal and then the Chicago Blackhawks, was picked up by Chicago off waivers, which is wild to me, thinking that we got that incredible of a goaltender. He was definitely one of the brighter spots because he came post 1961 and they were still competitive, but not as much as around the cup years or a year, but definitely was one of the brighter spots with a more declining team. Calder winner, Vezina winner, went to the Hall of Fame in 88, and then post playing was the general manager for the Pittsburgh Penguins for a while, and then was brought on by his brother down in Tampa when the Tampa Bay Lightning were being formed. And there's a big Esposito statue outside of the Tampa Bay Lightning arena that I was a big fan of because I'm a fan of both Esposito brothers, as Krusty told them at the convention one year.
Yeah. Yeah, I made the mistake of talking to Tony first and said, yeah, my daughter's a real big fan of your brother. I don't think that went over very well with Tony. Crusty old guy has had times where he's just like, what the hell were you saying? And that was one of my moments where my daughter just looks at me going, why did you do that? I don't know. Tony was a phenomenal goaltender, known for his masks. But he did it all. He was unbelievable.
Every highlight reel that you see before a game that has a goaltender and it's not Corey Crawford, it's Esposito.
Yep. And definitely deserving of the number retired. He was a constant. You knew you were getting 60 games out of him. You knew he was going to win between 30 and 35. He would keep you in every ball game. Just a phenomenal player. I don't know if he ever got a cup, but he was just unbelievable. There's not much I can say about it.
Like we said, we talked about Marian Hossa a lot last week, but obviously Marian Hossa's number is also retired. This leads me into our final thing that the Blackhawks are doing for their centennial year. They have the numbers up in the rafters, but then they're doing like a different thing. I feel like it's kind of similar to Rockford's Ring of Honor. It's almost like Krusty predicted this when Rockford started doing it a couple of years ago. And your fans are able to vote on a heritage player. So it's anybody from, is it 90 and back or 2000 and back? And then it's, yes.
Can we shelve this for next week? Or do you want me to attempt to do it by phone? But unfortunately, Krusty has to go because we're at an hour 10 already.
Well, hold on. I'm just explaining this really quick.
Okay.
So it's 2 votes. We'll see. The link will be down below if you guys haven't voted already. And we're going to talk more about this next week.
We're going to talk a lot more about it next week because I've gone too long and my bad.
Yeah.
I hate doing this to
This is what happens when we spend 35 minutes talking about our love for Seth Jones. Just as a reminder, make sure to hit that like and subscribe on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, however you watch or listen to us ramble on a weekly basis. That is all, and we will talk at you guys next week.